Good morning, Pa. All right, last time we left on how the divine feminine was desecrated, and Isaiah absolutely excoriated the Israelites at his time, and a sevenfold woman called Isaiah. No bread, no clothing, the righteous can still eat the fruit. Now we are on chapter 12. Grafted into their mother tree. The words of the prophet Zenos. Jacob presents, presumably in their entirety, words of the lost prophet Zenos, apparently spoken, and these words are presented as an allegorical history of the scattering of Israel, and a prophecy about the gathering. But there's more going in Jacob 5. If you remember, in chapter 1, I addressed the multivalence of symbols. That's the idea that any symbol, and in particular the symbols of the visionary men, can have more than one meaning. Throughout, the Book of Mormon has an outward-facing exoteric meaning that can be understood by and can benefit all who read. I agree. It also has an inward-facing esoteric meaning that is meant to be understood by those who know the mysteries of God. The exoteric understanding of Jacob 5 is that the olive tree represents Israel, and that the parable foreshadows the latter-day gathering of Israel. And Jacob reiterates that interpretation, and Nephi elsewhere quotes him on the subject. But the esoteric meaning of the text takes on a subject that we have already discussed at length, the story of a tree. In fact, Zenos' base text doesn't mention Israel at all. The theme of the parable is how difficult it is to get this tree to stick when it is planted, without it dying or going wild. The particular tree is the tree of life, and it's the tree of life that is also a mother, as we'll see below. So this chapter contains an allegorical history and prophecy about the worship of the goddess Asherah. Either Zenos is intending to deliver that history and allegory and merely disguises what he's saying as being about Israel, or Zenos is reworking an older text to a new purpose, but with such a light hand that the older text remains and shines through. I suspect the former is the case. This, together with what we know from Alma 33, tells us something interesting about Zenos. Here are some data points. 1. Zenos talks about the tree of life, but concealed beneath the appearance that he's talking about something else. 2. When the Zoramite poor presses Alma for practical specifics about how to worship when they can't access official cult buildings, Alma quotes Zenos to them. And 3rd, when the Zenos verses in Alma 33 talk about being in the wilderness, see verse 4, being opposed by enemies, verses 4 and 10, being cast out, verse 10, and being afflicted, verse 11. Zenos sounds like the very model of an underground prophet, like Abinadi or Alma, the elder. He preaches on the run, in hiding from his enemies. He even conceals the real subject of his writings, though we're about to see that the mask is thin. He has exactly the right authority for Alma to lean on to explain to the Zoramite poor what to do in their situation. To what extent was Xenos on the run and despised because of what he had to say about the mother tree, and his clear view that the tree was part of God's plan? Was Xenos a prophet friendly to the cult of Asherah in the name of Hezekiah or Josiah? We can only guess. I can't connect what Xenos describes in his allegorical history to specific historic events. And I can't even say with any confidence that the history contained in this allegory all relates to the history of Israel. So I'm going to comment only very lightly on this chapter. Any reconstruction on my part here is basically imaginative. And, I appreciate that. Like, to me, the allegory of the olive tree with Xenos is, I've always really likened it to Israel. That was the exoteric understanding of it. That's always been what's taught, and it's actually always very, very useful. And I love to call on the allegory of the olive tree, especially talking about the end times, how will be grafted back in, or that the children of Israel will be grafted back in, and both the wicked and the righteous will grow together. And I can understand that, you have the one that's placed out in the choicest ground, that half is righteous, half is wicked, being the Nephite population, and how the wicked of the Nephites overtake the righteous of the children of Lehi. All of that makes great sense. The other historical context is right. It's broad brushes, but to me it always made sense. But he's at least admitting that, hey, we may not be able to specifically say, well, this is specifically to this, and that's specifically to that. And I'm grateful that he admits it. He's like, look, since we're talking about trees and Asherah and sacred divine feminine figures, it only makes sense that, if Xenos was talking about a tree, that it's going to be about understanding the mother figure and the whole plan of salvation and happiness and wisdom and counsel. Yeah. So let's see what he has to say. 2 Jacobin sandwiches. We've seen Jacob wrap a message inside a presentation on the gathering of Israel before, in 2 Nephi 6 through 10. That was back in his book in chapter 6 as well. A comparison of these 2 set pieces of the prophet-priest Jacob is instructive. So in 2 Nephi, there is a gathering. That's 2 Nephi 6, 2 through 9, and 6, 2 through 9, and also verse 3. And in Jacob, it was Jacob 5, 1 through 3. The tree of life in 2 Nephi is a discourse on the travails of mankind in attempting to ascend into the presence of the tree of life. 2 Nephi 9, 4 through 52. Travails of mankind. Ascend into the presence of the tree of life. Okay. And then in Jacob 5, 4 through 77, a discourse on the travails of the Lord of the vineyard and his servants in attempting to bring the tree of life down to mankind. The gathering, there's 2 Nephi 9, 53, 10 through 10. 2 Nephi chapter 9, verse 53 through chapter 10, 22. So I need to read the upper one as 2 Nephi 6, 2 through chapter 9, verse 3. And anyways, it's Jacob 6, 1 through 4. The inverted parallel confirms the reading we're about to see together. The tree of life is not actually mentioned in 2 Nephi 9, despite all the detail from the course of the Lord that Jacob does include there. The missing tree of life is provided in Jacob 5. Jacob's choice to sandwich these discourses this way is interesting. He presents two blocks of material that relate to each other and inform each other's meaning, as Nephi does in 1 Nephi 8 and 1 Nephi 11:15. In fact, 11 through 15. In fact, maybe we should understand the two Jacob blocks as relating to and informing the meaning of the two Nephi blocks, and vice versa, placing Zenos's discussion of the tree of life within a framework of the gathering of Israel has effectively concealed its meaning, and now also helps reveal it by the way of comparison with the second Nephi block. So Zenos' discussion of the tree of life within the framework of gathering Israel, concealing its meaning, but also helps reveal it by way of comparison with 2 Nephi. Oh, this is subtle work. When we were ready, the meaning of Jacob 5 would be revealed, but until that moment, it would lie concealed in plain sight. Without dwelling on it, it's interesting to consider why Jacob chooses the gathering of Israel as the subject matter in which to wrap his discussions of the tree of life. Is it the shared theme of restoration? Adam and Eve must be restored to the garden, as the tree of life must be returned to earth, as Israel must be gathered home. Is it that for the Nephite prophets, the gathering of Israel is realized by delivering to scattered Israel the true tree of life? Introduction. Sorry, I'm thinking about his question about is it restoring the proper knowledge of the tree of life? It's an interesting one. I'm trying to figure out, since I'm fully in on this idea, my question is how does that change what I'm supposed to do or how I'm supposed to act? And the answer is it shouldn't change much. I mean, it helps me. It will absolutely enhance all the scriptures that I'm reading because I have a lot more things that I can now listen for and see and get an understanding of. It'll make the scriptures read a lot more different. But in the end, Jesus Christ, the Son, who was also under attack at the time, the idea of having a heavenly family in general was completely under attack. They were removing the child, they were removing the wife, they were leaving only a God in a cave without light to be untouchable, unfeeling, and above all, instead of a father who loves all his children. We got that restored. Instead of Jesus Christ, who, well, he basically restored himself in the meridian of time, even though it was ripped out of the Old Testament, even though it was plainly there beforehand, especially according to the Book of Mormon. So Jesus Christ restored himself, and we kind of figured there'd be a Heavenly Mother along there somewhere. Well, this shows where, and it helps unfold the scriptures a lot better and helps us understand how our temple we have now and how the Old Testament temples all combine together in a very, very deep and meaningful way. But the points are still the same. The idea of the cycle of the temple is still true and still there. The idea is that we have to refine ourselves every iteration of the loop that we go through, every time that we come feeling starved and wanting to be filled with righteousness, every time that we want to repent, every time that we want to let go of our older, less habits and become a better person and refine ourselves to do better if we slip or mess up, that we come looking for the presence of the Lord to be in our life and look forward to having that faith by keeping the commandments, having that hope and joy of knowing that we can, by trying to live his commandments, have that brightness of hope that he'll pull us through all our problems and difficulties, and that we'll be able to enter his presence, and that through having that brightness of hope, we can have that pure love of Christ towards all people, realizing all this petty stuff down here really doesn't matter, that it really is all about getting the gospel in people's lives. Because, yeah, there's power struggle this and power struggle that, but it just comes down to, if people let go of their problems that they have here and focus on refining themselves so they can enter God's presence, you become a Zion-like people. The point of having this information restored is to help make the whole story, and especially the temple story and information, be much more deep in your bones important, much more viscerally tangible. I mean, it's going to be a lot more meaningful for a lot of people in a lot of different ways. There's not just going to be one way. That's the point of symbols. But I just think about, like I mentioned in one of my other sidebars earlier, that there's a lot of people that are like, well, where's Heavenly Mother in the scriptures? Where's the divine feminine? What's the purpose of the divine feminine? And a lot of times people are like, well, she's so sacred that she's protected. What if she wasn't protected? What if instead it was ripped out, just like Jesus Christ was ripped out? What if it's been there the whole time, but we've been blind to see it? Because we have been. And that the concept of having a divine feminine has been so rooted out, so thoroughly, so gut-wrenchingly, horrifically ripped out, to the point that, the concept of talking with and enjoying the presence of a father, a heavenly father, who wants us to be with him, can be considered blasphemy for some people. Then taking it a step further, that, wait, there's a heavenly father, there's a heavenly son. Maybe there's a heavenly mother somewhere. Is a bridge too far? When it's already a bridge too far, that there's a heavenly father that loves his children, that wants us to be with him as his children, as someone who has grown up to become like him, if he wants us to make us like him. It's just, that's destruction on a huge level. When something becomes so forbidden and enforced with death, it becomes such a forbidden and forgotten topic. Yeah, no, I don't think it's because she was trying to be protected. I think it's because they thoroughly wanted to erase the idea of any idea of divine feminine. Which is funny because, like, the natural order of things just screams it anyway. And the natural order of things on what the characterization of it being: wisdom, counsel, life, growth, it's all there. But what does that do? To me, it gives me a greater appreciation for the role of women in the gospel, because to me it's like, if you think of the divine feminine always being there with Heavenly Father, then them working together for their children, it's no different than most parents. Her many names being counsel, wisdom, her having the beatitude kind of information associated with her because of being a sevenfold woman and the seven beatitudes and other things like that. It's working together to get things done. I don't know. The full structure of things doesn't change. And it gives you a greater appreciation of the whole story, and it gives you a greater appreciation of specific roles that were just torn out and chopped down and enforced through blood and steel. But I think that's a good point. It's something worthwhile to have. But does it change how I should change? Only in better understanding. Sorry, that's quite an aside, but it's something that's been rattling around in my head. Introduction. Behold, my brethren, do ye not remember to have read the words of the prophet Zenos, which he spake unto the house of Israel, saying, Hearken, O ye house of Israel, and hear the words of me, a prophet of the Lord. For behold, thus saith the Lord, I will liken thee, O house of Israel, like unto a tame olive tree, which a man look and nourished in his vineyard, and it grew, and it waxed old, and began to decay. Jacob 5:1-3. Here is the camouflage we are talking on the surface about the house of Israel. After verse 3, the house of Israel entirely disappears from the chapter. His olive tree began to decay. And it came to pass that the master of the vineyard went forth, and he saw that his olive tree began to decay, and he said, I will prune it, and dig about it, and nourish it, that perhaps it may shoot forth young and tender branches, and it perisheth not. And it came to pass that he pruned it, and digged it about it, and nourished it, according to his word. And it came to pass that after many days it began to put forth somewhat a little young and tender branches, but behold, the main top thereof began to perish. That's Jacob 5:4-6. Young and tender branches with a perishing main top suggest worship of the goddess that has gone astray, with vitality, meaning in some parts. Perhaps certain shrines or temples still keep to righteous paths, despite the corruption in the main body. That this is described as decay suggests to me that we're not dealing with violent apostasy like that of King Hezekiah or King Josiah, but some more subtle, gradual rot. Initially, the master goes forth. Later, this movement will become more tellingly vertical. The master of the vineyard has a plan. Quote, And it came to pass that the master of the vineyard saw it, and he said unto his servant, It grieveth me that I should lose this tree, wherefore go and pluck the branches from a wild olive tree, and bring them hither unto me, and we will pluck off those main branches, which are beginning to wither away, and we will cast them into the fire, that they may be burned. And behold, saith the Lord of the vineyard, I take away many of the young and tender branches, and I will graft them whithersoever I will. And it mattereth not that if it be so that the root of this tree will perish, I may preserve the fruit thereof unto myself. Wherefore I will take these young and tender branches, and I will graft them whithersoever I will. Take thou the branches of the wild olive tree, and graft them in the stead thereof, and these which I have plucked off I will cast into the fire and burn them, that they may not cumber the ground of my vineyard. Jacob 5:7-9. It's easy to imagine what grafting in the branches of a wild olive tree would be in this context. Worship of a divine woman is ubiquitous around the ancient Mediterranean, and indeed around the world, appearing at the very beginning of the human record everywhere. in what looks like a unitary worldview, bringing in worshippers who served the goddess or a goddess, but in pagan forms, could bring energy and vitality to a flagging cult. On the other hand, the risk would be that the wildness would overwhelm what remained of the true faith, and you were trying to preserve. The master of the vineyard quickly becomes the lord of the vineyard. He occasionally hereafter referred to simply as master, but the title of lord of the vineyard continues throughout. Servant in Hebrew is eved, derived from avad, to work or labor, and related to avodah, work. But an eved can also be a priest in the sense that eved, X means a servant. X means a servant of the god X, and avodah can be the work of a priest, and an oved from the same root is worshipper. Sorry, I'm looking at the footnotes to see if there's anything specific. Nope. Okay, so in the parable, the servant may just be a servant, but a Hebrew reader or listener would have heard the echo hinting that the servant in question was a priest of the Lord. Note what is at stake. A tree without good fruit will be chopped down and cast into a fire. Quote, and it came to pass that the servant of the Lord of the vineyard did according to the word of the Lord of the vineyard, and grafted in the branches of the wild olive tree. And the Lord of the vineyard caused that it should be digged about, and pruned and nourished, saying unto his servant, It grieveth me that I should lose this tree. Wherefore, that perhaps I might preserve the roots thereof, that they perish not, that I might preserve them unto myself. I have done this thing. Wherefore go thy way, watch the tree, and nourish it according to my words. Jacob 5, 10 through 12. Perhaps we should think of the pruning and nurturing as safety and prosperity, or access to populations who are willing to worship, or alliance with God's priesthood after the order of his Son to provide complementary liturgy and knowledge, or even literally fertile ground where a goddess of fruit, trees, and abundance can be seen to be powerful. Quote, and these will I place in the nethermost part of my vineyard, whithersoever I will. It mattereth not unto thee, and I do it that I may preserve unto myself the natural branches of the tree, and also that I may lay up fruit thereof against the season, unto myself. For it grieveth me that I should lose this tree, and the fruit thereof. And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard went his way, and he hid the natural branches of the tame olive tree in the nethermost parts of the vineyard, some in one and some in another, according to his will and pleasure. And it came to pass that a long time passed away. And the Lord of the vineyard said unto his servant, Come, let us go down into the vineyard, that we may labor in the vineyard. That is Jacob 5, 13 through 15. Vertical motion begins now. Nethermost means lowest. Once the Lord goes to the lowest parts of the vineyard, he appears to return to his dwelling. This has to be at the top of a 3-part space, because from this dwelling, he says to his servant, Come, let us go down into the vineyard. See figure 12, 1, which is on the next page, and I'll show it. Ascent and descent through the 3-part space strengthens the interpretation that we're looking at temple things, and specifically the goddess. She dwells behind the veil, and at the end of the straight and narrow gate. This is the story of the Lord of the vineyard and his servant continually descending out of the kingdom of heaven, trying to establish the worship of the mother and keep it faithful. This is Zenos's parable. It shows the 3-part space. At the top is the dwelling of the Lord of the vineyard, and then you have down below it the vineyard, and down below that the nethermost parts of the vineyard. And continuing. If we're to understand that this allegorical history took place in Israel, then the nethermost parts are probably the parts outside Israel. The logic would of the three-part space and the verbs Allah and Yarad, ascend and descend, ascend and descend, would likely mean that the Lord of the vineyard dwells in the temple at Jerusalem. The vineyard would be Israel and or Judah, and the nethermost parts would be elsewhere. Come, let us go down. Who has ears, let him hear. So a wild cult of the goddess comes among the Lord's people with its energy, but the few faithful natural branches that endure are led away into the world, here and there and hidden away. If I'm right, and this history and prophecy related originally to the worship of the goddess, then we might expect to encounter her symbols, ordinances, and true doctrine in various places in the world. Quote, and it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard and also the servant went down into the vineyard to labor. And it came to pass that the servant said unto his master, Behold, look here, behold the tree. And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard looked and beheld the tree in which the wild olive branches had been grafted, and it had sprung forth and began to bear fruit. And he beheld that it was good, and the fruit thereof was like unto the natural fruit. And he said unto the servant, Behold, the branches of the wild tree have taken hold of the moisture of the root thereof, and the root thereof hath brought forth much strength. And because of the much strength of the root thereof, the wild branches have brought forth tame fruit. Now, if we have not grafted in these branches, the tree thereof would have perished. And now, behold, I shall lay up much fruit, which sorry, I know I'm right in the middle of a big quote, but I'm sorry. I'm mostly blown away for just a second because to me, his idea of, we'll take in these kind of wild people who at least want to worship the divine feminine, when it's coupled with the people who have true traditions of the divine feminine being right next to the divine masculine and both working together jointly, help to overpower the wildness thereof, brings forth good fruit. To me, it reminds me of overtaking pagan symbols for the benefit of Christianity kind of idea. You know, the idea that there were like Christmas and the Christmas tree. I know how Nathan loves to plug on how, these were all pagan symbols and stuff like that, but what if, just what if, maybe this idea of a tree in your own personal home to remember that, Jesus Christ is the gift to all mankind may not be so far off. It just, bonk, whoa. Oh, wow. How crazy, how close that is. Bonk! It just hit me in the head. Holy cow. And then we're always like, oh, Christmas is such a commercialized holiday. That I can agree with. But I sit there and think about, what was it, the Dutch? Remember the old Christmas stories where it showed that they put candles. They put candles in the tree. Or candles in the wreath around the head, and the little girls would have their hair braided. They'd put a wreath on their head and a candles in the wreath. my goodness. Okay. Woo. Wow. 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 Okay. Sorry. I was right in the middle of it. Behold, the branches of the wild tree have taken hold of the moisture of the root thereof, and the root thereof hath brought forth much strength. And because of the much strength of the root thereof, the wild branches have brought forth tame fruit. Now, if we have not grafted in these branches, the tree thereof would have perished. And now, behold, I shall lay up much fruit with the tree, which the tree thereof hath brought forth. And the fruit thereof I shall lay up against the season unto mine own self. And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard said unto the servant, Come, let us go to the nethermost part of the vineyard. And behold, if the natural branches of the tree have not brought forth much fruit also, I must lay up the fruit thereof against the season unto mine own self. Jacob 5:16-19. As discussed above, to labor can mean to do the work of a priest. And the word labor appears 12 times in this chapter. The wild branches work, they draw water into the tree, they result in good fruit. Then the Lord of the vineyard and his servant descend again. And it came to pass, they went forth whither the master had hid the natural branches of the tree. And he said unto the servant, Behold these. And he beheld the first, that it had brought forth much fruit. And he beheld also that it was good. And he said unto the servant, Take of the fruit thereof, and lay it up against the season, that I may preserve it unto mine own self. For behold, said he, this long time have I nourished it, and it hath brought forth much fruit. And it came to pass that the servant said unto the master, How comest thou hither to plant this tree, or this branch of the tree? For behold, it was the poorest spot in all the land of thy vineyard. And the Lord of the vineyard said unto him, Counsel me not. I knew that it was poor, a poor spot of ground. Wherefore I said unto thee, I have nourished it this long time, and thou beholdest that it hath brought forth much fruit. And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard said unto his servant, Look hither, and behold, I have planted another branch of the tree also, and thou knowest that this spot of ground was poorer than the first. But behold, this tree, I have nourished it a long time, and it hath brought forth much fruit. Therefore gather it, and lay it up against the season, that I may preserve it unto mine own self. And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard said again unto his servant, Look hither, and behold another branch also, which I have planted. Oh my gosh. Behold, that I have nourished it also, and it hath brought forth fruit. And he said unto the servant, Look hither, and behold the last. Behold, this I have planted in a good spot of ground, and I have nourished it this long time. And only part of the tree hath brought forth tame fruit, and the other part of the tree hath brought forth wild fruit. Behold, I have nourished this tree like unto the others. And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard said unto the servant, Pluck off the branches that have not brought forth good fruit, and cast them into the fire. But behold, the servant said unto him, Let us prune it, and dig about it, and nourish it a little longer, that perhaps it may bring forth good fruit unto thee, that thou canst lay it up against the season. And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard and the servant of the Lord of the vineyard did nourish all the fruit of the vineyard. Jacob 5:20-28. I often read that the branch of the tree that was in the good ground was the Nephites and Lamanites, because this was a choice land above all others, and it was also the half and half of the tree. So it looks like the Laman and Lemuel brought, the corruption with them. The first tree planted in the nethermost parts of the vineyard has produced good fruit. Note that counsel me not in Hebrew likely represents the form of ya'atz, the verb connected to etza. What is a poor spot of ground in this context, and in what did much nourishment consist? What made the second place even worse, and what was the good ground? And what does it mean to lay up or preserve fruit in the context of this allegory? For that matter, what would it mean if this were all about the gathering of Israel? Well, to me, it was gathering people, gathering their souls is what I was thinking when it was gathering Israel. Anyways, does preserved fruit mean the souls of people who have lived and died in righteousness? That's what I always thought. It's easy to conjecture what might constitute wild fruit in this context. Goddess cults often exhibit such features as castration, human sacrifice, orgiastic elements, and incest. Yeah, that's the bad part. Engrafting of wild branches, or simply the human tendency to decline into sin, might lead to these and similar practices. Yeah. A long time had passed away. Dude, that Christmas tree thing. So funny. And now it makes me want to go back to other ancient origin stories and see about divine feminine figures. I want to go back to the Japanese one because I did that report on it a long time ago, and see what they have to say. Anyway, a long time had passed away. Quote, "And it came to pass that a long time had passed away, and the Lord of the vineyard said unto his servant, Come, let us go down into the vineyard, that we may labor again in the vineyard. For behold, the time draweth near, and the end soon cometh. Wherefore I must lay up fruit against the season unto mine own self. And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard and the servant went down into the vineyard. And they came to the tree whose natural branches had been broken off. The wild branches had been grafted in, and behold, all sorts of fruit did cumber the tree. And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard did taste of the fruit, every sort according to its number. And the Lord of the vineyard said, Behold, this long time we have nourished this tree, and I have laid up unto myself against the season much fruit. But behold, this time it hath brought forth much fruit, and there is none of it which is good. And behold, there are all kinds of bad fruit, and it profiteth me nothing, notwithstanding all our labor. And now it grieveth me that I should lose this tree. And the Lord of the vineyard said unto the servant, What shall we do unto the tree, that I may preserve again good fruit thereof unto mine own self? And the servant said unto his master, Behold, because thou didst graft in the branches of the wild olive tree, they have nourished the roots, that they are alive, and they have not perished. Wherefore thou beholdest that they are yet good. And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard said unto his servant, The tree profiteth me nothing, and the roots thereof profiteth me nothing, so long as it shall bring forth evil fruit. Nevertheless, I know that the roots are good, and for mine own purpose I have preserved them. Because of their much strength they have hitherto brought forth from wild branches good fruit. But behold, the wild branches have grown and overrun the roots thereof. And because that the wild branches have overcome the roots thereof, it hath brought forth much evil fruit. And because that it hath brought forth so much evil fruit, thou beholdest that it beginneth to perish, and it will soon become ripened, that it may be cast into the fire, except we should do something for it to preserve it. Jacob 5:29 through 37. The original tree now produces a baroque array of fruit, and it's all bad, evil, of no profit, to the point that the evil fruit is killing the tree. I doubt we're in a position to unlock this allegorical history anytime soon. Nevertheless, I think we can learn something important from it, something that maybe is relevant to our spiritual position, as well as our ability to, for instance, receive the rest of the Book of Mormon. If this chapter really is about the worship of wisdom, counsel, the goddess Asherah, then one overall takeaway is that it's really hard to do it right. Trees in good ground still go wild. Trees with good roots and lots of nourishment still produce all sorts of fruit, but nothing good. The Lord and his servant continue their descent. Quote, And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard said unto his servant, Let us go down into the nethermost parts of the vineyard. And behold, if the natural branches have also brought forth evil fruit. And it came to pass that they went down into the nethermost parts of the vineyard. And it came to pass that they beheld that the fruit of the natural branches had become corrupt also. The fruit of the natural branch, yea, the first and the second and also the last. And they had all become corrupt, and the wild fruit of the last had overcome that part of the tree which brought forth good fruit, even that the branch had withered away and died. Jacob 5:38-40. The word corrupt appears here for the first time. Various Hebrew words are translated as corrupt in the Old Testament of the King James translation. But the most common is shachat. Shachat can refer to ruined fruit trees, as it does in Jeremiah 12:10, where it's translated as destroyed, and Nahum 2:2, where it's translated as marred. But it can also refer to sexual sin. For instance, it describes the state of the earth in Genesis 6. The state of the earth? And it came to pass, when man began to multiply on the face of the earth, and the daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man with whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast and creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man, and perfect in his generations. And Noah walked with God. And Noah begat 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. So corrupt. God looked upon the earth, and it was corrupt. The flesh had corrupted his way upon all the earth. Yeah, okay. This famous story is told only briefly here, but at more length elsewhere. The sons of God are divine beings, angels, and they lust after mortal women. This is the sin that ultimately leads to the situation described in verses 11 and 12, where the verb shachat is in 3 different forms in quick succession, emphatically tells us that the earth has fallen into sexual sin, necessitating the flood. Another example of shachat, meaning specifically sexual corruption, is the story of the golden calves. Once Aaron finishes making the calves, the hijinks begin. Quote, And they rose up early on the morrow and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings, and the people sat down to eat and to drink, and rose up to play. And the Lord said unto Moses, Go, get thee down, for thy people, which thou broughtest out of the land of Egypt, have corrupted themselves. Exodus 32, 6-7. To play here is tzichech, meaning to sport, i.e. to engage in conjugal caresses. It has that meaning, for instance, in Genesis 26:8. The Israelites are expressly sinning sexually, and it's said of them that they shechet, have corrupted themselves. Why does this matter? Because the appearance in the parable of the word corrupt confirms that this is in origin a story about the attempt to bring the righteous worship of the mother goddess to God's children. Goddess worship has a tendency to degenerate into licentiousness, which is illustrated with the images of wild branches and evil fruit, and denounced 9 times in the parable as corrupt, meaning sexually immoral. And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard wept, and said unto the servant, What could I have done more for my vineyard? Behold, I knew that all the fruit of the vineyard, save it were these, had become corrupted. And now these, which have once brought forth good fruit, have also become corrupted. And now all the trees of my vineyard are good for nothing, save it be to be hewn down and cast into the fire. And behold, this last, whose branches hath withered away, I did plant in a good spot of ground, yea, even that which was choice unto me, above all other parts of the land of my vineyard. And thou beheldest that I also cut down that which cumbered the spot of the ground, that I might plant this tree in the stead thereof. And thou beheldest that a part thereof brought forth good fruit, and that a part thereof brought forth wild fruit. And because I plucked not the branches thereof, and cast them into the fire, behold, they have overcome the good branch, that it hath withered away. And now behold, notwithstanding all the care which we have taken of my vineyard, the trees thereof have become corrupted, and they bring forth no good fruit. And these I had hoped to preserve, to have laid up the fruit thereof against the season, unto mine own self. But behold, they have become like unto the wild olive tree, and they are of no worth but to be hewn down and cast into the fire, and it grieveth me that I should lose them. But what could I have done more in my vineyard? Have I slackened my hand that I have not nourished it? Nay, I have nourished it, and I have digged about it, and I have pruned it, and I have dunged it, and I have stretched forth mine hand almost all the day long, and the end draweth nigh. And it grieveth me that I should hew down all the trees of my vineyard, and cast them into the fire, that they should be burned. Who is it that hath corrupted my vineyard? And it came to pass that the servant said unto his master, Is it not the loftiness of thy vineyard? Have not the branches thereof overcome the roots which are good? And because the branches have overcome the roots thereof, behold, they grew faster than the strength of the roots, taking strength unto themselves. Behold, I say, is this not the cause that the trees of thy vineyard have become corrupted? And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard said unto the servant, Let us go to and hew down the trees of the vineyard, and cast them into the fire, that they shall not cumber the ground of my vineyard. For I have done all that I could. That could I have done more for... Oh, God, let me try that again. What could I have done more for my vineyard? But behold, the servant said unto the Lord of the vineyard, Spare it a little longer. Jacob 5:41-50. God is moved by the tendency of his children to descend into the same sin everywhere, despite all the labor of God and his servants. Note the stretched forth hand, in emblem of God's continued offer of mercy. The answer to the question, who is it that has corrupted my vineyard, is that the branches have done it. They grew too fast. They got out of control, and they became corrupt. Energy without restraint, enthusiasm without wisdom, lead to trees that must be burned. God doesn't want to destroy the trees. He must, because of their nature. Filthiness cannot inhabit the kingdom of God. This servant of the Lord of the vineyard pleads with his master for more time, not unlike Abraham, pleading with God to spare Sodom for the sake of a dwindling number of righteous people. I will graft them into the branches of their mother. Yeah, it'll be a little long, but let's finish this off. We begin reading this chapter as an allegorical history and prophecy about the worship of the mother goddess, essentially on the basis that it was an allegory about a tree. At this point, seeing a tree in Scripture ought to be like seeing a mountain. We should automatically ask ourselves if there might be more under the surface. And on top of all the more under the surface, we've already seen 2/3 of the way through, we're about to hear Zenos straight up tell us that he's really talking about the worship of the mother. Quote, And the Lord said, Yea, I will spare it a little longer, for it grieveth me that I should lose the trees of my vineyard. Wherefore let us take of the branches of these which I have planted in the nethermost parts of my vineyard, and let us graft them into the tree from whence they came. And let us pluck from the tree whose fruit is most bitter, and graft in the natural branches of the tree in the stead thereof. And this will I do, that the tree may not perish, that perhaps I may preserve unto myself the roots thereof. for mine own purpose. And behold, the roots of the natural branches of the tree which I planted whithersoever I would are yet alive, wherefore that I may preserve them also for mine own purpose. I will take of the branches of this tree, and I will graft them in unto them. Yea, I will graft in unto them the branches of their mother tree. He bolded and italicized it. I'll graft them into their branches of their mother tree. So it's interesting. So he's taking these branches, he's grafting them into the mother tree, but he's preserving the roots of these trees elsewhere. And I'm wondering if he's preserving the roots, like the history of this tree elsewhere, so that we can figure it out. Like I said, now I want to look for divine feminine figures all over and see how close are these? How do these line up? Yea, I will graft into them the branches of their mother tree, that I may preserve the roots also unto mine own self, that when they shall be sufficiently strong, perhaps they may bring forth good fruit unto me. And I may yet have glory in the fruit of my vineyard. And it came to pass what they took from the natural tree, which had become wild, and grafted in unto the natural trees, which also had become wild. And they also took of the natural trees which had become wild, and grafted into their mother tree. And the Lord of the vineyard said unto the servant, Pluck not the wild branches from the trees, save it be those which are most bitter. And in them ye shall graft according to that which I have said. And we will nourish again the trees of the vineyard, and it will trim up the branches thereof, and we will pluck from the trees those branches which are ripened, that must perish, and cast them into the fire. And this I do, that perhaps the roots thereof may take strength, because of their goodness, and because of the change of the branches, that they may overcome the evil. And because that I have preserved the natural branches and the roots thereof, and that I have grafted in the natural branches again into their mother tree, and have preserved the roots of their mother tree, that perhaps the trees of my vineyard may bring forth again good fruit, and that I may have joy again in the fruit of my vineyard, and perhaps that I may rejoice exceedingly, that I have preserved the roots and branches of the first fruit. Wherefore go to and call servants, that we may labor diligently with our might in the vineyard, that we may prepare the way, that I may bring forth again the natural fruit, which natural fruit is good, and the most precious above all other fruit. Jacob 5:51 through 61. Emphasis added. Yeah. Whoa. Now he tells us. Here, deep in the parable, Zenos lets the cat completely out of the bag. This is the great allegorical history and prophecy about the mother tree. Zenos says so 4 times. This is the thing that Val Larson pointed out to me, and this is huge. The footnote for that is Val mentioned it to me on the phone, but he's also written about it, and he quotes the book pages. The specter haunting the Book of Mormon is the tree of life and all it means. I think this is the door that we have to go through to get out of our state of stagnant condemnation. And Zenos warns us it isn't easy. Why 4 references so densely clustered together? One thought is that 4 references so tightly grouped are hard to miss, even though they're buried deep in this lengthy allegory. Another is that the course of the Lord likes things in sets of 4 gestures of justice and mercy, 4 messianic symbols asked and given, 4 times grasping the word. Maybe also there is some perceived sacred significance or numerological association with the number 4 too. It is easy to conceive that the Nephites might have seen 4 as the number of earth, with all associations noted above, plus earth of the plane and ecliptic has 4 corners in its 4 solstitial and equinoctial points, and 4 beatitude blessings are realized on earth in the space of the Hekal, and 3 as the number of heaven, Father, Mother, Son, 3 spaces in the temple, 3 beatitude blessings realized at the entrance to the kingdom, totaling a total of 7. The number 4 then might emphasize that this parable is about the earthly manifestation of the mother tree, and not about the mother behind the veil, in Eden, the kingdom of God. This is speculative, of course. Of course. Of course. Clearly stated, on the other hand, is that the parable is about the fruit that is most precious above all other fruit. The fruit more precious than any other fruit can only be the fruit that comes from the tree that is precious above all. And indeed, Nephi says as much to Laman and Lemuel, quote, "Wherefore the wicked are rejected from the righteous, and also from that tree of life, whose fruit is most precious and most desirable above all other fruit, yea, and it is the greatest of all the gifts of God." That's 1 Nephi 15:36. This parable is expressly about the tree of life. And if we still miss it, note that the word joy appears in verse 60. For the first time in the parable, joy is Lehi's reaction to eating the fruit of the tree of life. Go to and labor in the vineyard. Wherefore let us go to and labor with our might this last time. For behold, the end draweth nigh, and this is for the last time that I shall prune my vineyard. Graft in the branches, begin at the last, that they may be first, and that the first may be last, and dig about the trees, both old and young, the first and the last, and the last and the first, that all may be nourished once again for the last time. Wherefore dig about them, and prune them, and dung them once more for the last time, and for the end draweth nigh. And if it be so that these last grafts shall grow, and bring forth the natural fruit, then shall ye prepare the way for them, and that they may grow. As they begin to grow, ye shall clear away the branches which bring forth bitter fruit, according to the strength of the good, and the size thereof. And ye shall not clear away the bad thereof all at once, lest the roots thereof should be too strong for the graft, and the graft thereof shall perish, and I lose the trees of my vineyard. For it grieveth me that I should lose the trees of my vineyard. Wherefore ye shall clear away the bad according as the good shall grow, that the root and the top may be equal in strength, until the good shall overcome the bad, and the bad be hewn down and cast into the fire. And they cumber not the ground of my vineyard, and thus I will sweep away the bad out of my vineyard. And the branches of the natural tree will I graft in again into the natural tree. And the branches of the natural tree will I graft into the natural branches of the tree. And thus will I bring them together again, and they shall bring forth the natural fruit, and they shall be one, and the bad shall be cast away, yea, even out of all the land of my vineyard. For behold, only this once will I prune my vineyard. Jacob 5:62-69. Zenos now describes a process that precedes the end. It seems to be a reunification of the original tree, by finding all the good branches, grafting them together until they shall be one, and casting away the rest, one presumes hewing down and burning, since that's what prescribed elsewhere in the parable. And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard sent his servants, and the servant went and did as the Lord had commanded him, and brought other servants, that they were few. And the Lord of the vineyard said unto them, Go to and labor in the vineyard with your might. For behold, this is the last time that I shall nourish my vineyard. For the end is nigh at hand, and the season speedily cometh. And if ye labor with your might with me, ye shall have joy in the fruit, which I shall lay up unto myself against the time which will soon come. And it came to pass that the servants did go and labor with their mights, and the Lord of the vineyard labored also with them, and they did obey the commandments of the Lord of the vineyard in all things. Jacob 5:73. Note about the few servants laboring with their might. Reminds me of early revelations of the restoration in which individuals were admonished to thrust in their sickles with their might. These few servants here have the consolation of knowing that the Lord of the vineyard labors with them, and if they are to think that we might be in their number, we are admonished that we must obey the commandments of the Lord of the vineyard in all things. Quote, And there began to be the natural fruit again in the vineyard, and the natural branches began to grow and thrive exceedingly, and the wild branches began to be plucked off and to be cast away. And they did keep the root and the top thereof equal, according to the strength thereof. And thus they labored with all diligence according to the commandments of the Lord of the vineyard, even until the bad had been cast out of the vineyard. And the Lord had preserved unto himself that the trees had become again the natural fruit. They became like unto one body, and the fruits were equal. And the Lord of the vineyard had preserved unto himself the natural fruit, which was most precious unto him from the beginning. And it came to pass that when the Lord of the vineyard saw that his fruit was good, and that his vineyard was no more corrupt, he called his servants, and said unto them, Behold, for this last time have we nourished my vineyard, and thou beholdest that I have done according to my will, and I have preserved the natural fruit, that it is good, even like as it was in the beginning. And blessed art thou, for because ye have been diligent in laboring with me in my vineyard, and have kept my commandments, and have brought unto me again the natural fruit, that my vineyard is no more corrupted, and the bad is cast away. Behold, ye shall have joy with me, because of the fruit of my vineyard. For behold, for a long time will I lay up the fruit of my vineyard unto mine own self against the season, which speedily cometh. For the last time have I nourished my vineyard, and pruned it, and dug about it, and dunged it. Wherefore I will lay up unto mine own self of the fruit for a long time, according to that which I have spoken. And when the time cometh, that evil fruit shall again come into my vineyard, then will I cause the good and the bad to be gathered, and the good will I preserve unto myself, and the bad will I cast away into its own place. And then cometh the season and the end, and my vineyard will I cause to be burned with fire. Jacob 5:73 through 77. The Lord of the vineyard and his servants are successful. The tree is unified, the most precious fruit is restored. The vineyard is no longer corrupt, and we get the one and only occurrence in the parable of the word blessed. Oh, the happiness, ashrai, indeed, of these diligent servants in the Lord of the vineyard. With their might and their obedience, working together with their Lord, they have restored the tree of life to her rightful place among them and on the right hand of God. There's the QR code.